This podcast is brought to you by the Heldridge Hotel, New Brunswick's only 4-star hotel and a preferred hotel of Rutgers football fans. The Heldridge helps you make the most of your game day weekend, providing premium accommodations in the cultural heart of downtown New Brunswick. Restaurants, bars, theaters, parks, museums, and more are only steps away. Whether you're traveling alone or with a large group, book your stay at the Heldridge and make the most of your game day weekend. Visit theheldridge.com today.
On Friday, November 15th, Netflix and Most Valuable Promotions bring you the highly anticipated heavyweight boxing mega event of the year. Jake El Gallo Paul will go toe-to-toe in the ring against Iron Mike Tyson, the baddest man on the planet. Don't miss this epic showdown live from AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. Watch Paul versus Tyson, Friday, November 15th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, live only on Netflix.
From NJ.com and the Star Ledger, welcome to the Rutgers Rant, your one-stop podcast for the Scarlet Knights, with your hosts Steve Politi and Rutgers insiders Brian Fonseca and Pat Lenny. Let's start shopping.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Rant, our Maryland Picks Pod edition. We also have some basketball to talk about, a victory over St. Peter's that was probably more exciting and more closer than Steve Pike would have liked, but in the end, a W nonetheless. Let's start with football, though, folks. Heading down to College Park, at least the two of you are. I look at it this way, fellas. Rutgers is never going to be the football program that it needs to be in the Big Ten unless it starts beating Maryland, right? I mean, that's just like the baseline for any success. It was Indiana for a while. Now Indiana's going to go on and off the schedule, so it's even more Maryland. And this is the number I dug up, which kind of stunned me. I knew it was bad. I didn't know it was this bad, though. The Terps have won 7 of the last 9, and some of those haven't been close. It's a 36-18 margin. They've doubled up the Scarlet Knights over those games. I don't know, man. Is that going to change anytime soon? What is your feeling, generally speaking, about the state of this quote unquote rivalry?
My bigger concern is the results in College Park. Rutgers has won twice in College Park. One of them was an overtime win during the pandemic with no fans in the stands. It's not like they have humongous fan support in the first place, but it still is worth mentioning. A game after Greg Schiano started crying after the game-winning field goal went through. It was clearly very emotional. And then in 2014, they win this insane 41-38 back-and-forth comeback in their first year in the Big Ten. And then they've lost every single one since, including in 2022 when they go there needing a win to make a bowl game, and they get absolutely shellacked 37-0. Beat so bad, Greg Schiano's in the post-game press conference contemplating his career choice and whether he wants to keep doing this. That's how bad the Terps beat Rutgers last time they went there. So that's why this game, to me, has always been one where I think Rutgers might – in the preseason, when I thought Rutgers was going to have a great season, I thought this would be a place they would slip up. Now that Rutgers needs one more win to make a bowl game, I think it's a game where Rutgers is not going to clinch their spot this weekend.
I don't even think you have to go back to 2 years ago. I think you look at last year's game against Maryland, and the state of both programs tells you exactly where the state of this rivalry is. Rutgers had a chance for a get-right game at the end of the season, and Maryland just came in and blew the doors off. And it ended up being 42-24, but that game was should have been 42-0, it felt like. And my big question for Greg Schiano this week was, how much different is Maryland now without Talia Tagovailoa? And how much does that change Maryland's attack, offense? And honestly, his thing is more that Billy Edwards Jr., the quarterback now, is still playing at a high level, and the offense hasn't changed that much. They still have skill players all over the place, and it still looks like the Maryland of the last couple of years under Loxley, who I think, in my opinion, doesn't get enough credit for what he's done there. I think he's done a terrific job. The consistency is there for Maryland, I think. And maybe that's because of Talia, but I think the offense is still really good this year.
To add to that point, sorry, I just want the stats here. Against FBS opponents, Maryland throws the ball 58% of the time, which is the 12th most nationally, and they pass the ball 43 times a game, which is the 3rd most nationally. So the quarterback is different. but they still throw the ball all over the yard, which is a concern for Rutgers. Their secondary played much better against Minnesota coming off a bye week. Will they be as fresh against Maryland? That will be, I think, obviously the biggest matchup there.
So you think it's just a matchup thing? Because what I don't understand about the two programs, all right, so Rutgers went through some dark times, and I get it. That allowed Maryland to get ahead there during the Ash years. There's some of those scores happened when Chris Ash was coach. Programs were, going in the up, one going down. I get all that. But for me, what I don't understand about the Maryland success in this rivalry is why are they better than Rutgers? Like, it's not facilities. Okay, maybe a little bit tradition. I mean, unless you go back to the 50s when there's not much tradition there. Is it recruiting? I don't know. You look at the rankings, they're about in the same place. Is it philosophy? Maryland's not a better school. It's not a better location. It's not a better market. Like, I just don't like what do you think it is? Is it as simple as Mike Loxley's recruiting better players?
They had a better quarterback for
better quarter. Is that it? The baby Tua was
really it. Honestly, like that set the foundation for Maryland. They knew they could score 25, 28 points a game just because they knew Talia was a steady and as consistent of a quarterback for I think, was it 3 or 4 years? Even after transferring from Alabama, just really consistent and gave them the foundation that Loxley was hoping for to build a team around and kind of set the tone and the philosophy of the program. I think that was huge. I mean, that's only the last couple of years though. If you take it back to the Ash era, I'm not sure.
They weren't beating anybody, so maybe
sure
they beat Maryland during the Ash era. Ash's best year, they beat Maryland at home.
That's right. That's a good point. That is a good point. That's one of the two. So you're right. Yeah.
So I think it does come down simply to matchup. They've had better quarterback play and elite athletes on the outside, and that's just destroyed Rutgers. It's not like Maryland is running the ball all over Rutgers like some of these Big Ten teams. They're just throwing the ball all over the yard, and Rutgers has not been able to cover them. And I think that's kind of, again, the challenge they're going to face Saturday. If they could stop the pass, they'll give themselves a chance. If they can't, we could have another USC or UCLA on our hands.
Right. All right. So what do we think is going to happen? And I come back to it. Maryland is 1-5 in the Big Ten. Some not great results. I get it. They beat USC. It's turned out that everyone's taking a turn and whacking that pinata except for Rutgers, but still a good win. I'm going to give them that. We lose to Northwestern. That kind of counterbalances it. What do you think? Where do you think this team is? I mean, is Maryland going to a bye game this year? You think a bowl game this year?
Well, they probably have to beat Rutgers to do so, right? They're 4-5 and with 3 games to play, which makes this game, intriguing in that front for both teams, right? I think both of these teams Rutgers doesn't need this game, but I'm sure they'd like to clinch bowl eligibility as soon as possible. And Maryland probably has to have this game, right? So I think ultimately they'll make a bowl game, right? I think Loxley desperately needs them to make a bowl game to kind of keep some momentum on his end. And I think Maryland sees this game as a game much like Rutgers circles this game on its calendar as a winnable game. I think Maryland certainly has to do the same to Rutgers based on their history in recent years.
I think Maryland has played a difficult schedule. The results are up and down, but when you can score, you give yourself a shot. And I think the last couple of games, you're kind of going to see it. And I've been saying all along, like, this is the bad matchup for Rutgers. We'll get to that later, but yeah, if I had it, let's see, Maryland versus Rutgers versus Iowa at Penn State. That's their final 3. Difficult schedule.
Yeah,
they have to win this one. They have to win this one, and they can't beat Iowa. They're not going to beat Penn State, especially not when Penn State is going to make the playoff unless they fall, they get upset. So they have to win this one.
And coming off that tough trip at Oregon, I mean, watching that game, you looked like Maryland's running back was a little dinged up. Felton was taking some big shots. So tough. Maryland's kind of just in a tough little gap here, but I don't know. I'm still worried about this matchup. I won't say
this is the first time. We'll say this, and you mentioned last year's game for me, and the moment that I kind of crystallized, Rutgers is not winning this game, and Rutgers is getting a new quarterback was the same play, and I've talked about it in this podcast where Gavin Wimsatt drops back. There's the 6'5" tight end whose name Bowman was that his name was standing
Sean
wide
Bowman,
open.
yep.
Sean Bowman and Gavin overthrew him by like 8 feet, and I'm like, all right. That's it with this. The game got out of hand immediately against Maryland. I just don't think this year that's going to happen. And maybe I could be wrong. I look at this offense. I loved what I saw in a lot of ways from the offense last week. I think you're starting to see some receivers develop for Rutgers. Quarterback playing pretty well. Not perfect, but he's playing pretty well. Is this going to be like a 39-38? It's going to be a high-scoring shootout game that Rutgers can theoretically have the ball at the end and, outscore Maryland? Is that where this thing's heading?
I think that's the only way Rutgers can win this game. I mean, we could be wrong, right? This could be a 13-10 nail-biter. Rutgers can turn any game into a 13-10 nail-biter. But I think more likely than not, Rutgers is going to have to win a shootout. I think they have the pieces, to your point. Ethan Kaliakmanis in the first half could win any shootout. Ethan Kaliakmanis in the second half against Minnesota, not really. So he kind of said this after the game as well. He has to be more consistent and do what he did in the first half across an entire game. And I think he'll need to do that against Maryland because their offense is pretty well oiled. The young wide receivers have to continue winning those 50-50 balls down the field. Dymere Miller has to play like he did in the first half. To me, the question is right tackle, Tyler Needham. Is he going to play? He got hit very awkwardly on his knee, limped off the field. Greg Schiano was very coy about his status. Based on what I saw, my eye test, my guess is that he just won't play, right? That's a hard – it was a rough look. And if you lose your right tackle, I'm not sure, one, who replaces him, and I'm not sure how that impacts the level of the offensive line, who had a good game against Minnesota and was probably the most underrated reason the offense looked as good as it did in the first half.
To answer your original question, Steve, I think to me it comes back to what Rutgers team is going to show up with or without Kyle Monungai. If Kyle Monungai plays, does Rutgers go back to the run the ball 25 times a game, try to control the clock and win with defense? Or is this going to be a game that Rutgers has to win 35-34? And compete, up and down the field with Maryland. I think a lot of that is predetermined. I always think that Rutgers with Monungai would rather win a game 21-17, but without Monungai, I think the impetus is on Kaliakmanis and the offense to really go out there and win the game. So we'll see on the Monungai front. I know that's a kind of a weak answer, but I think that's really the identity of the team, and there's no other way to kind of spin it.
All right, let's stick to football. Let's do the know your opponent segment, then we'll make our picks because I think I know which way you guys are leaning. But anyway, know your opponent. In case you guys don't know, we ask these 3 trivia questions and they get them wrong each week. That's not true. You guys have been better. You guys getting better. The first one, this is great. I love this question. All right. In 1932, I always like to get something recent for you Zoomers to pinpointer. In 1932, Curly Bird, the man's name was Curly Bird, who served as the university's football and baseball coach, athletic director, and president. Curly Bird at Maryland in 1932 as baseball, football coach, the athletic director, and he ran the university in his spare time. That's a man. I mean, that's a man with a lot of responsibilities. Anyway, Curly Bird proposed adopting the Diamondback Terrapin as a mascot. In 1947, students from Johns Hopkins stole the 300-pound bronze statue of the Diamondback turtle, the Terrapin. You can see it on campus. What happened next? Johns Hopkins stole it. A, Maryland students traveled to Baltimore to retrieve it, laying siege on the house where it was hidden and leading 200 city police to respond to the ensuing riot. B, the Johns Hopkins students melted down the statue into a square block, which still sits in front of a fraternity house today. C, the statue was eventually returned later that year, but would inspire an episode of The Wire in which Kingpin Stringer Bell uses its theft to motivate his gang. Or D, no one has ever seen it again. What happened to the Terrapin?
So it's not D, because I've rubbed its nose for good luck. It's not C, because I've watched The Wire. A lot of good police, and no Terrapin, from what I remember. So I'm going to go with A, because everyone loves a good trip to Baltimore to get some crabs, and I'm sure that's part of the motivation for those College Park students to go up there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go with D. That the turtle that Brian touched is a replica.
A replica
So,
turtle.
a
No,
replica.
that Brian got it right. Yeah,
Ah.
200 police, 200 city police needed to quell the riot. I love that, man. They take that crap seriously. All right, second question. Boomer Esiason is widely regarded as the best Maryland quarterback, or at least one of the two best. His nickname is Boomer because his mother, Irene, called him that while he was in the womb due to his constant kicking. That's not his real name. What is his real name? Is it A, Rudolph, B, Norman, C, Chester, D, Milton?
Wow.
What is Boomer Esiason's real name? I thought you guys would know this one. This is exciting to me. If you don't know this.
What was AB? Can't remember.
A, Rudolph, B, Norman, C, Chester, or D, Milton?
I'm going Rudolph. I listen to this guy every day.
Rudolph Esiason, A, Rudolph Esiason. All right, Brian.
There are NFL fans just screaming at this. All 5 NFL fans screaming at their screen about this. D, I guess. I don't know.
Milton Esiason. No, it's Norman. Norman Boomer Esiason. Yeah. All right. I thought that was an easy one, but people are screaming at the no doubt. All right. Final question. Maryland was a founding member of the ACC in 1953, which back then was just a 7-team conference. Which of these schools was also a founding member? A, Georgia Tech, B, Virginia, C, South Carolina, or D, Florida State?
B.
You going with Virginia? Pat?
Yeah, I agree. Virginia.
No, South Carolina. Heard you on
Man.
that one too. Woo!
Had to be the
That's for
trick.
Cratch. That's for James Cratch if he still listens to the podcast. South Carolina. Yep, Virginia came in the next year.
In hindsight, so obvious. It was the one that didn't fit. It was the one that's not currently in the conference.
So,
0 for 3 for Lanny. Oh,
Lanny just he's not chopping the segment. All right, good job. You guys want to do your picks?
Sure. I have not calculated, but I believe I was wrong because I picked Rutgers to cover. Oh, no, I was right because Rutgers won.
Yeah,
I was right.
You're
'cause I
half
picked them
right. You were right.
That's right.
You're right.
You got
But
it
in the
straight up
tie-
wrong. Yeah.
You got the straight and the tiebreaker. That's all I wanted to point. We had an argument in the press box about this. I
Yes.
picked Rutgers to win outright. Therefore, I believe I should be first in the standings if there is a tie-breaking function. That's all.
Well, the
That's all.
tiebreaker in this situation is straight up, which you would now take the lead because Brian was not correct in the straight up pick.
But Brian was not he was not acknowledging that was the case when we were discussing this in the press box. That's all.
The tiebreaker comes at the end when it's all over. Right now, the standings are fluid, obviously.
But currently, if you were to make the standings, I would be on top. That's the only point I was making.
All right,
If
in
you
that
were to
case,
look at
go ahead.
this-
Make your pick first.
I'm going to make my pick.
The line is Maryland -6.
-6.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
All right.
Some places have 5.5. I would like to vouch to go to 6.5 personally, but I could understand if you guys want to stay at 6. Or we can go 5.5.
No, let's stay at 6. Oh, it could be a tie. We're
gonna push. We're gonna inevitably
All right.
push.
Yeah, you're right. Let's do 5. Want to do 5.5?
5.5 is
All right,
fine.
5.5.
Yes.
Okay, 5.5. All right. I'm gonna. I know where you guys are going, and even though I've technically got the lead, I still think Maryland is overrated on this podcast. The only place in America that is overrated the Maryland Terrapins. I've looked at the results. I haven't watched more than a few minutes of them. I'm sure they're fine. I'm sure the quarterback's fine. The defense is bad. Like they have given up 20-something points every single game that I've seen. I think Rutgers is playing well offensively. I think they found something defensively. I mean, at least for 1 week last week against Minnesota, I think they're going to win this game. I just have a hunch. I'm going with a hunch. Always a bad idea to pick with a hunch, but I'm going to go with Rutgers like a 35-31 victory to get bowl eligible right here, turn their season around. Bang.
Football is not played on paper as much as we would like it to be. I think Rutgers is not going to be able to cover Maryland's wide receivers, and it's not going to be able to replicate the pressure it had on Minnesota's quarterback against Maryland's quarterback. And I think that ultimately will do them in. I don't think they're going to be able to keep up offensively. I will say Maryland wins this one 31-24 and covers the 5.5.
Okay. They'll be shifting in the standings.
Mm-hmm. All right. No one has hyped up Maryland more than me this entire year. So I am the Maryland hype machine since week one. I can't go back on the hype now. Even against Oregon, when I watched Maryland, I still thought, wow, like they were competitive. And if not for a couple turnovers in that game, it would have been a lot closer. Can Rutgers take the ball away? That's always the question. But I still think the skill position players are better on Maryland. The quarterback play is probably about equal. And Rutgers defense until last week was significantly worse than Maryland's, especially during that 3-game stretch. So I am going to continue the Maryland hype here, stick with the Terrapins, 35, Rutgers 28.
A cover. Okay. I was going to call Mike Loxley's agent and see if your phone rings. That's what I was going to do. All right. I'm out on a limb. I was out on a limb last week, and I ended up in the right spot. Let's see if I am again this week with my Scarlet Knights. Good stuff. All right. Any last football thoughts, or can we talk some basketball, really?
Yeah, I got nothing else. I'm excited for the trip. Always fun to go to College Park or State College. I like to drive to these places rather than fly out personally. So, and they got Nando's at College Park, which is always, I don't know if I'm going to make it this time, but it's always fun.
I don't know what this guy's talking about. I'd rather fly 10 out of 10 times than drive. So yeah. The only highlight of this trip for me will be leaving my car somewhere on the Jersey Turnpike for Brian to pick me up. So if anyone lives in like the 7A territory right around like Robbinsville, tweet at the Rutgers Rant. We might need your driveway.
Nice. All right. We'll see how that goes. Looking forward to hearing about that trip. Can't make it. I've got sock drawer to organize. All right. Basketball. Let's talk about this. Kind of an interesting game. St. Peter's pesky Peacocks, as Lanny wrote. Didn't see that coming necessarily, but I think overall, you wrote this, Brian, that maybe it'll turn out to be a good thing for this young team to have a test. And one that they won by double digits in the end. They pulled away, and I don't think I really ever thought they were going to lose that game. But Steve Peichel said this, and watching the first half, St. Peter's hit a lot of crazy shots, but Rutgers also played really poorly defensively, and I think rebounding well as well. That to me was a bad trend. Do you think they reversed it enough, Brian, for you to feel better about what you saw in the second half from the team in those two areas?
I thought they might have lost that game. As I was writing the running gamer, St. Peter's is up a point with 4 minutes to play, and I certainly thought this would be quite something. I think they reversed it enough in the last 4 minutes. I think Steve Peichel made a smart choice going small ball, putting Martini at the 5, and that kind of made it difficult for St. Peter's to create any open looks. I also think St. Peter's was absolutely gassed. They were down one of their best players who got hurt in his ankle early in the second half. And they were just chucking stuff up at the end of the game, like just praying the ball would go into the basket. That certainly helped. That being said, I think the start of the second half was a good sign of the defense fixing itself, because the first half they were leaving 3-point shooters open all over the place. They were getting caught in screens. They were lackadaisical. They were just not up to the standard that you would expect from a Rutgers defense. Started the second half. They were playing hard. They were forcing tough shots. They were getting rebounds. So I think that is encouraging, but as valuable as it is to win a close game against the St. Peter's, I do think it's hard to quantify, but I do think that is valuable going forward. I think you probably would like to have seen them kind of blow this team out of the water, but St. Peter's credit, they always play teams tight because they play physical, which a lot of teams aren't ready for early in the season. They attack the glass, and they do have some shooters, obviously, if they're going to be hitting some of those tough shots.
I thought the defense down the stretch, to Brian's point, was fantastic. St. Peter's was certainly forcing a lot, but what Rutgers did really well down the stretch was that interior defense was so good. The St. Peter's guards could not drive to the basket and get over Martini, I thought, and Durkak was just like he has been in every game, just all over the place, just active hands, and that relentless defense is kind of what I keep coming back to. He's like the effort guy on the team. It's very clear so far. So I thought when crunch time came, they made the plays, and that's kind of what mattered most. But yeah, the first half, it's just, I don't know what the issue was defensively. It just seemed like there were a lot of open shooters, and I don't know. I don't have the answers for that one, but it was pretty apparent the defense was definitely lackadaisical in the first half.
So Brian knows this is coming, and I made this point that if I could fire up the DeLorean, get it to 88 miles per hour, hop inside and go back in time, I would go back 10 years and deliver his copy of the report card in which a player who scored 24 points on 8 of 17 shooting with 1 of 6 rebounds, 3 turnovers, 1 foul in 32 minutes for Rutgers would get a B+. I loved it. Dylan Harper. That's not an A. We're already judging him like he's Michael Jordan. Defend yourself. B+.
So you listed off all the good stats, which there were many good stats.
I mean, they're like good stats. 24 points and 8 of 17 shooting.
Well, Bart Torvik,
6 rebounds.
And the plus minus differential. That's
it's gonna throw out some. If you look at his adjusted scoring for the
no, you could find him right on the box score. You failed to mention
1 of 6 and 3s. Oh, God.
Okay. And 3 turnovers. I mean, are we just gonna
three turnovers? Get the ball in his hands for 32 minutes.
1 assist, which partly is because his teammates weren't hitting open shots, which is a big problem. St. Peter's had a lot of open shots. They knocked them down, right? Having an open shot is not an invite to hitting it. You have to actually knock it down. And Rutgers shooters did not. They went 3 of 16 on 3. Dylan Harper missed 5 of them. I think more than missing the shot, it's some not great shots, right? Like we know Dylan Harper can drive to the basket. We know he can finish. I think he's trying to prove himself a little bit as being able to hit some threes, and he missed 5 of them, and he had 3 turnovers. And he struggled early on. Sorry, I almost knocked over mine. He struggled early on in doing anything because St. Peter's was putting all of their defensive energy in stopping him. He eventually got through with it. And to defend my grading, which is subjective and kind of, this, I'm not a Harvard professor grading law students here, but we're splitting hairs between an 89 and a 90. Could I have given him an A? Sure. If I give him an A now, what am I going to give him when he goes for 30 points on, 12 of 13 shooting against Purdue? What am I going to give him? An A+? I think we got to have a little bit of
okay. All right.
Come on.
That's fair. The point, I tweeted this, Pat, and I just keep on coming back to it because you watch him and it's just, he's brilliant. Like, I don't know, I don't know if this is an exaggeration. People couldn't give me an answer, couldn't come up with anybody, but I'm convinced that he is the best player I've seen in the Rutgers uniform in my 26 years doing this. I don't go back to Phil Sellers. You can say, you can text me and say, "Oh, what about James Bailey?" I didn't see him. I'm sorry, I wasn't there. I didn't see him. And again, Doobie had one great year. He's only 2 games into this, but man, it's freaking awesome.
It's incredible. And when you think about the great stars of college basketball, it's like, what do they do with the ball in their hands to create, right? Like, this guy can just get to the basket at will, finish at will. And down the stretch, like when you watch the NCAA tournament, there's always that great guard that just takes over the game. In the final 6 minutes of this game, I think Harper probably took 90% of the shots. Obviously, Ace Bailey's not playing yet. That may change down the line, but that star power is so omnipresent and it's just all over the place. So absolutely looks like the best basketball player that I've ever seen at Rutgers. There's no question. 2 games, sure, but you factor everything in, the ratings coming in, the evaluations, the legacy, it's already through the roof. So I think you're absolutely right.
And he might not be the best basketball player we've seen by the end of next week, which is kind of funny. I don't know. I assume we're going to see, if he says he wasn't far off, Ace Bailey, we're going to see him for the Monmouth game or the Merrimack game. That's my guess, Brian.
Your guess is as good as mine. He has a minor hip thing. They're maybe Friday is the day that he plays. Steve Peichel said he's close. Steve Peichel also said he's the doctor, so I guess I can't take anything he says at face value. I don't know. I think Rutgers fans would like to see him debut against Monmouth, or at the very least against Merrimack, so they can watch him play for the first time as a Rutgers player at the rack. I certainly think that's more likely than not, but I don't know. I will say, he looked pretty good moving around in pregame warmups. He was throwing up threes. He was acting as a kind of traffic cone for teammates trying to dribble around him. He was joking around, and obviously that's not playing basketball. There's a whole different level of physical exertion when you're playing a basketball game. But he did not look like, to me, a guy who was really limping around and struggling and laboring. He looked like he was pretty fine, which I think is a good sign that he'll probably be on the court sooner than later.
He got an A+ on our Discord for enthusiasm, right?
Maybe an all-time screen.
Oops, Brian lost his feed. We'll talk about that.
I'm back. I've been looking into the feed and giving a thumbs up, like just an all-time screenshot that most people didn't see because it's on BTN Plus. But next time there's a big game, I can guarantee you your timeline is going to be funny. Ace Bailey thumbs up pics.
It was fun. He looks like he's a lot of fun. I mean, he looks like he's just like a fun kid. That's the best way you can describe it. And I've not been around him a lot. I'm just looking at what I'm observing from afar. He's having a great time, enjoying his college experience. Same with Dylan so far. I mean, I don't know if Dylan was Pat. He was in the press conference. Was he kind of like bright eyed as much as he was the first time around, or what was the vibe this time?
Yeah, I thought so. Not as bright eyed as the first one, obviously, because he's been through it, but I think his answers are always very, very thoughtful, well-spoken. Actually, all three of those guys that were up there, Jordan Durkak, Harper, and PJ Hayes, were tremendous. Just so thoughtful, great quotes. So, yeah, I thought there's star power there, and there's no question. Yeah. Obviously, we keep saying that, but it's special.
And it's fascinating because Durkak and people ask this question a lot, who's going to lose the minutes when Ace comes back? Durkak's the most likely answer. And it's funny, early in that game, I was thinking to myself, a whole lot of Durkak. But when you're done with him, I mean, it doesn't show in the box score a lot of stuff he does. He's just kind of like just a really smart glue kind of guy. I don't know, that's a cliche. I get it, but he made some plays in that game, but even late in the game, that were really important. I think I'd be interested to see how much time he gets when Ace gets back. If I don't know, do they shift Ace to the 4? I mean, there's a lot of things they can do to get them both on the court at the same time, but I mean, he's earned his minutes, I would say, at this point.
I think it's possible Martini ends up shifting to the bench and coming back on.
Is that well? I mean, Martini made 2 of the biggest plays in the game too. I mean, he hit the 2 free throws. He got that rebound late. He's a guy, who played some defense up front. He's a guy I don't want to take off the court either.
You can only put 5 guys on the court.
I understand. Some guys got to go. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it makes sense to take Ace out because, defensively, you'd still have the same structure with him as a 4, right? Because he'd be playing similar to what Martini does as a 4. And then offensively, you'd have 4 guards, if you count Ace as a guard. And I think you need somebody on the court when Ace is on the court as like a defensive bulldog, right? I think Jordan Durkak fills that role. I think either Jordan Durkak or Jermichael Davis. So I think Steve Peichel has a lot of options on his hands, and I don't envy him trying to figure out these rotations. But I think I don't know if we'll get the full picture. Let's say if he does play against Monmouth. I don't know if we'll get the full picture because I do think some of these early games are tinkering with lineups and experimentation. So we probably won't know until Big Ten starts.
I would expect he probably comes off who knows? You would think you would ease it in if you're coming off an injury. You wouldn't play as many minutes you're going to play overall. But then again, you only got, 30 of these with Ace Bailey. You're going to play him. So
Steve says he doesn't change the starting lineup after wins. I just cannot imagine Ace Bailey's debut at Rutgers not being in the starting lineup so he can be part of the pregame introduction and the crowd gets hyped. It just would feel off to me if Ace Bailey's first ever game at Rutgers, he came off the bench.
The entire video is the 2 of them standing next to each other, right? I mean, like it's
as it
like
should be.
That's the entire video. That's the entire hype video. Yeah.
It's like when you're waiting for that amazing movie to come out and like you just see trailers for like 3 years preparing you for this amazing moment.
Yeah.
And it never kind of quite lives up to it, but this one feels like it's going to be that blockbuster moment. It's like, that was worth the wait. So
we'll see. Poor Monmouth, 0-3. Merrimack, how's Merrimack this year? That's a question I didn't think I'd be asking on this pod. Probably pretty good. Maybe we'll see him in one of those games. All right, I want to take a few questions. We've got some questions on this Discord. Having a great time in the Discord. I don't know if you guys have found it, the Rutgers Rant channel. You should have an invitation. If you don't, we'll send you one. Just shoot us an email. We got like 225 people in there. How about that? Question from Dave White in the Discord. Do you think this basketball team's ability to finish at the run, as it's shown so far, will continue to translate into success in the bigger games? Translation: will they keep making layups against better teams? I think Dylan Harper will. I don't think that's isolated to St. Peter's. Be interested to see the rest of them. That's a good question. What do you think, Brian?
They always have 1 or 2, 3 smart cuts to the basket, and they finish those pretty easily. I think those will continue. A lot of teams get most of their layups through their center. Rutgers has not gotten a lot of layups through their center. Lathan Somerville got a couple of them, but even still, every time he posts up, half the time he's kind of fading away and going away from the bucket as opposed to the opposite. So I'm curious about that. I don't know. A lot of this is also decision-making. Jordan Durkak is bullying his way to the rim against these much smaller guards and these low major teams. I don't think he's going to be able to do that in the Big Ten unless he goes Paul Mulcahy booty ball style. I just can't expect him to do that against better competition. And he's making some tough shots. Jermichael Davis made a couple of tough shots, but that's all he does is take tough shots. So I just can't imagine that will be sustainable at the rim. So I think it's a fair question, but I will say that Rutgers has had 2 better games at the rim in the first 2 games of the season than they've had in probably 2 years. Yeah. The finishing has been great. And like you said, most of that is because they have Dylan Harper, who can finish at almost any angle.
A lead finisher. Yep.
Yes.
Was the question about at the rim or in transition on the run, play on the run?
At the rim.
At the rim.
Ability to finish. He said at the run, but I think he means at the rim.
Okay.
But to the second point, Pat, I think
what I was going to say.
Question.
The point I was thinking while Brian was explaining that, I think they play very well in transition.
Mm-hmm.
Durkak's one of those great guys. When the ball is in his hands, he's out on the run. He's looking to pass. Jeremiah Williams moves the ball really well up the court, and then Dylan Harper, of course, is just has great vision in transition. So I think what I've seen, at least in 2 games, is that Rutgers transition basketball is really much improved. These guys can really run the floor really well, and that's leading to some easier layups and finishing at the rim too.
You'll laugh at this. As I was watching this game, there was a moment in the first half where I'm like, they need to slow this down. And then it's like, smack. What are you out of your mind? After 6 years of watching 51-47 and all these games where he's dribbling back and he's he's waiting to the last, and then someone jacks up Cam McConnell jacks up a 30-footer. Finally they have this offense that can play with some tempo. I think that should be part of their identity. I love it, and I don't know. You would think it would become even more so with Ace Bailey out there. Yeah, right. But
absolutely, imagine that guy with some space and the ball moving all over the place. That's right. Unbelievable.
And as Brian said, St. Peter's was gassed at the end. That might have won them the game. So I'd hope they continue doing that.
I do think they should probably slow down sometimes in the half court. You take shots a little less early, a little later in the shot clock. Maybe don't force things too early. I certainly think that was something that stood out to me when they were discombobulated in the first half. But I agree. If they can push the ball, I think they should keep doing that.
Right.
This is the kind of offense that Steve Michael talked a lot about last year, about wanting to run. He talked about a lot. They obviously weren't able to do that. Now you're kind of seeing what they kind of wanted to do. So,
right. Yeah. Personnel helps.
Sure.
The people. All right. Any other final thoughts here on hoops, Brian?
Yeah. I thought Emmanuel Ogblade was better than he was the first game. He had another rough start, but he had a decent second half, had a dunk, got some rebounds in traffic, played twice as many minutes. So by that logic, against Monmouth, he'll play 20. And then eventually by the 4th game, he'll play all 40 minutes. But I thought he looked better. I did not think he looked great. I don't think he looked particularly good, but he wasn't disastrous, which again.
Right. But he's the second best center on the team. That's the problem. I mean, Somerville was great again, very good again, at least. Now, great's not the right word, but a second good. And that to me is important. Like, all right, the first game wasn't a fluke. Like, he still shows nice moves around the basket. He's got great footwork, just fantastic footwork for a kid that age. I mean, I just think he's good. And I want to see it against a better team. I get it. But Pat, I mean, again, second game in a row where you see a player who can elevate the ceiling for this team.
Yeah, no question. And again, Steve Pikiell's big takeaway after game one was that he aggressively rebounded, wasn't afraid to stick his nose in there, get a little dirty. I thought every time I looked, this guy was on the floor, like just really physical, aggressive game. And St. Peter's, what Brian said earlier, was a very physical team. I thought Somerville was matched that intensity. And the more and more we watch him, it's becoming clear he's not just this offensive player. Like, I think he can really develop into being a strong player in the paint.
Had a heck of a block, looked like a volleyball spike. Which I think that's my curiosity is more on the defensive end when the competition gets better. He's looked good so far. Like you said, encouraging that he built on the first game, played well in the second.
All right, and one other question. That I love this one because it comes up every year, but it's a good one. Is Rutgers Maryland a real rivalry? Is one question. And why isn't there a trophy for Rutgers Maryland if it is a rivalry? I think Cratch had the idea he wanted to do like Delaware as a trophy or something. He had some cockamamie idea. The second time Cratch has come up, I'll have to text him and find out what trophy he wanted to do. Is it a rivalry? I don't know. I mean, probably not. No,
it's not a rivalry until Rutgers starts winning some games. Right?
It's not a rivalry. People care more. Yeah, you got to care more about it. No one cares more about this game than any game on the schedule. Right?
That's a great point.
No one hates Maryland.
No one hates Maryland. I hate Maryland.
Do people hate Rutgers too? Right? Like, it's almost nationally. Like,
mostly Rutgers fans.
Yeah, that's good. That's right.
No, but Rutgers fans aren't waking up in the middle of July like, I hope we beat those Terrapins this year. Like, it's not
right.
I don't think that's the case.
Yeah,
I think it was smart for the Big Ten to make Rutgers Maryland the protected game on the schedule. It makes sense that they came in the league together. They're geographically close. The makings of the rivalry are there, but I think until there are competitive games and some fire, it's just not going to happen.
Yes, Rutgers fans hate Penn State more, but that is certainly not a rivalry either. I mean, I get like that's the game that would be the best. That if Rutgers could ever get to the point where that was a competitive series in football, that would be a great rivalry. It is not that yet, clearly, but still, to me, that would be the game that Rutgers would love to have as its rival. Is Seton Hall a rivalry? What is the rivalry? Basketball. Seton Hall's a rivalry. Yeah,
definitely.
I think so.
Yes, no doubt about it. Though I would say again, it's not one of these like 365 year-round rivalries. I think Rutgers fans dislike Seton Hall for a week in December, and then it's kind of I don't sense a overwhelming sense of hate, which I think is essential for a legitimate strong rivalry.
Absolutely. All right, what else? We got a home game for the women's soccer team in the NCAA tournament, 6 seed. I say, nice, good draw. We feel good about it.
UConn, yeah, right. I feel pretty good about it. Can't lose to UConn. Yeah,
home game, right?
Home game on Saturday. Big weekend, right? Friday basketball, Saturday football, soccer, Sunday wrestling. Big time. A lot of things going on.
No doubt. See you on. That's good. A lot of things going on. You better nap up now, Brian.
Sorry.
He's ready for the 4-hour drive to College Park. He's excited for it.
You're going to be doing the driving. Good stuff. All right. Should we wrap there?
Really quick. By the time this podcast is out, it will be announced. The Knights of the Raritan are collaborating with the Rutgers Athletic Department on United. It's another membership drive for the Knights of the Raritan. First 500 new members to sign up get a free T-shirt. Really strong inducement for people to sign up. But beyond the drive itself, it's the fact that Rutgers Athletics is collaborating with the collective 2.5 years after it was opened. The leadership before the current leadership was not very receptive, is the nice way to put it, to NIL and to the collective especially. And Ryan Fasari, who I did not speak to for the story, he has still not spoken to any media in the 2 months since he's taken over the job. 3 months since he's taken over the job. He is clearly more receptive to the collective. He was at the collective's event in downtown New Brunswick within 2 weeks, a month of him having the job, and now he's doing this event. I think it's a move in the right direction. I wonder if it's a little too late because of revenue sharing coming up next year. But it is worth noting that Rutgers is finally working with its ally in the collective.
Yeah, symbolic if nothing else.
It's helpful. It can't hurt. I don't know how much it will help. It cannot hurt.
Absolutely. Unification.
I think what we're learning is that it's really hard to raise the money through $50 here and $50 there. They need $500,000 here, $500,000 there. We knew that from the beginning. That's always been the case at Rutgers. But yeah, I mean, obviously, if it's better than not doing anything. Someone is trying something, to me, is the important part, as opposed to throwing up your hands and saying we can't get it done. I give the Knights of the Raritan a ton of credit for continuing to get knight. Here's a knight metaphor: getting the jousting stick and charging into this windmill. They are not done with it. They're not giving up when they could have. Really, that group could have kicked so many times by. I love our putting it on the podcast. Past administrations, still trying. Yeah.
And Rutgers, to take a basketball metaphor, has finally taken the layup. This is the biggest layup of all time, was just appeasing them, helping them, spreading the word to their mailing list, kind of just amplifying the message. And finally, they're just doing that, like clicking 2 buttons.
Yeah. It just occurred to me. This just cracked me up. It just occurred to me that the previous AD was worried about violating the letter of the law on NIL while he was conducting an illicit affair against university policy with one of his coaches. Talk about crazy things running in your head, huh? That's
well, you can't commit 2 crimes at once, isn't that the old adage? I mean,
it's true. That's good. On that note, should we
also? Is he Voldemort? We can say his name, right? Pat Hobbs. We don't have to call him the old AD, past administration, the one who shall not be named.
Well, I guess you're right. Yeah, we can. It just was a funny gag. It seemed like a good gag at the time.
Sorry.
All right, let's wrap it up. You guys have a nice trip. We'll be back to discuss the Maryland victory, as I'm predicting some basketball stuff as well on Monday. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Rutgers Rant. To participate in the conversation and receive live updates about the Scarlet Knights directly to your phone, sign up at NJ.com/insider.